let me tell you just a little bit about myself, just enough so you know, as it were, where I'm coming from. So I'm the Director General of the Association for the Tech Industry in Brussels. I've been doing that for about 5 years. My job is, in a sense, to herd the industry cats in order that we can present a position to Vice President Ansip and his colleagues as what the industry thinks about particular issues, either in response to Commission proposals or indeed we might try to be proactive and suggest things that could be done. So my job is to represent those tech companies that are active in Europe, regardless of where they're headquartered, and my members also include the national associations across Europe. A little about that in a moment. Actually, so as you can imagine, having done this for a number of years, and please help yourself to some water, panellists, because I know you're going to need it. Having done this for a number of years, been involved in cybersecurity industry partnerships in the UK and also at a European level. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Funnily enough, I think I learnt more about the issues to do with cybersecurity in my role as chair of an audit committee at a British university, where we were responsible for the identification, mitigation and management of risks, and we were on the receiving end of quite a serious cyber attack. So I had to sort of manage the governance aspects of a cyber attack, and that taught me, well, that probably brought home to me the sort of realities of the things that I knew in theory. Enough about me. My main job is to be the moderator for this afternoon's session, which is to take the conversation in a direction that adds value to you and crucially finishes on time. And I'm hoping that we can be about maybe just a little less than an hour, maybe 10 to the hour, if that's okay. Yes, okay, so I know you might want us to steal a few minutes of the coffee break as well, and that's absolutely fine. That's my main job. Now, there will be an opportunity to involve you, so at least, for a third, maybe even a half of that time, we'd like to get some conversation going with you. And one rule I always have when doing this, there is no such thing as a dumb question. There's certainly dumb moderation, I accept that, but there's no such thing as a dumb question. Now, the title of this particular panel is Initiatives and Roles of Government Regarding Data and Cyber Issues. So we've got two aspects. It's the role of government, but I think you can't only talk about government. I'm sure we will want to hear about government in partnership with other actors, but we're primarily about government, but maybe not exclusively, because I think we all know government can't do these things alone. So I'd be interested to hear what government should do in context of other actors as well. And it's not just about cyber, it's about data. And we've already heard, I think, about the uses of data. I mean, we've heard already about the world of IoT, what's happening there. I agree with you about the tip of the iceberg, but the pace of change is phenomenal. In April this year, I was party to the European Commission's launch of the digitisation of European industry, and I happened to bump into an old friend of mine who runs the Industrial Internet Consortium. He's based in Chile, but he runs this global organisation. And I said, how's it going? And he said, well, it's great. He said, a year ago, we had 100 members. They were mostly American. He said, now, and this was last April, 250 members. The American companies in the minority. And if you look at their website now, you'll see that they are still growing. So if you think about major companies involved in the industrial use of the internet and the connectivity, you can see how this tip is getting bigger and bigger, but it really is. That's a really big use of data and networks today that we're becoming increasingly dependent on. Our panellists this afternoon, we've got a great lineup for you. Now, what I'm going to do, if it's okay with you, is introduce them as I ask them the first question, as it were. And then I'll sort of, that way I can maybe justify the question that I'm going to ask them. I'm going to ask the first question to Arnie Schönbohm. Now, Arnie has been for 1 year now, he's been the president of the Federal Office for Information Security. But I'm not sure if you'd arrived. You were given a little introduction earlier, Arnie, as well. And we heard that you'd run a not-for-profit network in Berlin on this topic. You've written books about the topic. You've worked in industry. But for the last year, you've had this responsibility for the German government. So if the topic of this afternoon's discussion is primarily what should government do, you've had a year to think about that. So what are you doing?
That's a great question. Huh? I'm still thinking to answer. Huh? So probably quite easy. Less talking, more walking. That would be a good answer. You know, everybody is talking about cybersecurity. But when I'm looking to how much we are really investing there, what we are really doing there operationally, I think there's room for improvement. Not probably on the Siemens side, fine. But probably, I don't know.
Always room for improvement.
Always. So, but when I'm looking for the backbone in Germany, you know, the small, medium-sized companies. When I'm waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, the CEO of a small, medium-sized company, Professor Kempf knows it very well from the former times we worked together at the Alliance for Cybersecurity. And you wake them up and ask them regarding digitalization. They can explain you regarding disruptive technologies, new markets, chances, everything. And if you ask them, so what are you going to do regarding information security? He will say, hey, that will be done by my IT guy. That is a reality, and this is not appropriate. And this is something I really think we have to change. It is this, on the one hand, that we are thinking regarding what is the right way, how we want to have this kind of digitalization. Absolutely right. And it is mandatory, therefore, that we need information security on a minimum level. And that's what we try to do for example, on the critical infrastructure side, where we have the IT security law which is passed, which is currently under the phase of implementation. We are starting to cooperate in a partnership way, very strong with different kind of partners, with small and medium-sized companies, but also with the bigger companies. We started with the Alliance for Cybersecurity, which is now more than 2,000 members, especially, for example, like Volkswagen and other bigger companies, the users, so the potential victims of them, and not just to ensure that the company is getting safer, but also that the product development is improving regarding information security. We are doing there lots of issues for the different kind of bodies on the government. Yesterday, for example, I discussed together with Minister Grue regarding health and health card, how information security is looking like that. It's the same for automotive industry we are doing for the Ministry of Traffic Logistics and so on. And we are doing the same for the Ministry of Economic Affairs regarding energy and smart metering, these kind of change. And all these are smaller steps. We try to go forward in this kind of direction in a very partnership way. And I'm a strong believer regarding that information security is a value creator and the precondition for all areas of digitalization. And that's what I try to do as a president of the BSI. And there, just one last issue. In BSI, we have a kind of mission statement I created roughly a year ago when I started. And there we said very, very, very easy, BSI as the National Cybersecurity Authority shapes information security in digitization through prevention, detection, reaction for state, industry, and society. And that's how we see it. So we see us as the one authority which is shaping, so not doing everything on your own, but doing it together with all the different kind of partners. And their industry, business is a very important partner for us, the same like science and government.
So just following up on that, I mean, it sounds as if most of your work is with partners. It is about promoting education, raising awareness. One of the things that really struck me, and I was talking earlier about my role as the chair of the audit committee, is that and I regarded my role was to allow the governing body to sleep peacefully in their beds at night, as it were. But when we looked at the issue of cybersecurity and information security, it wasn't really on the main risk register of an organisation. I think that's your point about oh, it's something the IT guy deals with. Are you finding that you have a job to promote it to boards and to appropriate levels of governance?
So, very easy. The government understands it now. You know, there was a famous saying from the chancellor who said, it is Neuland, huh? It's new land. I can tell you, she knows very well about it. Huh? When I had been in the chancellor office with Altmaier, he said, hey, we have to go to Estonia. And I told him, you know, the IT security is based on the IT security, IT Grundschutz from BSI. So, and then it was modified by Estonia. So they understand it there very well. But when I go, for example, to the supervisory management board there of Dr. Dehnen, for example, when I'm speaking with them, sometimes I have the feeling they understand very well regarding risk management, but do we really need cybersecurity as a special risk issue or not? This is something I think we have to develop, and we have to develop in a cooperative way. If this is not going to work, to be very clear, we became more and more dependent on the area of networking and interoperability. Then we will have to think regarding liability for management if you are bringing to the market products which have not a minimum level of information security. So talking and walking.
Talking and walking as well. Does that, if I can turn to our second panelist, Jane, does that ring true with you? Now, Jane Hull-Lute is, she's an Undersecretary General at the United Nations, but she's really here in her capacity as, I think, as just a fantastic expert in this field. You were number 2, I think, Deputy Secretary at the US Department of Homeland Security, and also ran the Center for Internet Security. You were the CEO of that not-for-profit in the US. So does what you've heard from Arnie, does that ring true with you? Was that the approach, the sort of approach that you were taking?
It rings true. No two governments of the 193 members of the United Nations are approaching this problem in the same way. So I think, and when I listen to your question, I want to step back and say, what executive in any enterprise today can get away with claiming ignorance on cybersecurity? I mean, there's no enterprise in the markets we deal in today. There's not one that delivers its value without relying on IT and access to the internet. So if one is claiming ignorance, you're behind in your reading badly. There is no enterprise that delivers value without relying on access to the internet and IT. And you can tell an awful lot about the relative health and value, I think, of an enterprise simply by looking at its cybersecurity posture. That's all you have to look at. It's sort of like when you go to the doctor and he takes your vital signs. He can tell a lot about your relative health just by looking at you and taking a few signs. You can tell a lot about a company just by looking at its cybersecurity posture. Because of that dependence in delivering value, you can tell something about how well it's protecting its core IP. Thank you. You can tell something about the robustness of the IT infrastructure that it's operating on. You can tell something about how compliant it is with existing regulations, never mind any new ones that might be presented. You can tell an awful lot. I mean, when I was at the Department of Homeland Security, we were really beginning to wrestle with the third of 3 questions, which I don't think we successfully wrestled to the ground. And frankly, today in 2017, we haven't wrestled to the ground either. Question number 1, how do we architect systems we can trust from components we can't? Question number 2, how do we ensure the integrity of your information and your identity in an open internet? Now, I know this is an audience that cares a lot about privacy. I have come to care a lot about privacy, even though the Lutes have no privacy. I was the lead negotiator for the United States with the EU on the PNR agreement, the Passenger Name Record Agreement, which pivoted for our European colleagues around the issue of privacy. For Americans, it pivoted around the question of security and safety for the air traveling public. And for the aviation industry, it pivoted around predictability. Highly differentiated interest sectors coming together, where information security is key. Question 1, how do we architect systems we can trust from components we cannot? Question number 2, how do we ensure the integrity of our identity and our information in an open internet? And question number 3, what should the role of government be in all of this? And none of those questions have been satisfactorily resolved.
So what answer did you, to that third point, how far did you get then?
So this was a really interesting debate because we had very powerful voices in the United States that said, let the market handle it. The private sector invented IT, it invented the internet, yes, government helped, but the market will solve the problem of cybersecurity. And on the other hand of the debate were very powerful voices that said, you know, it's a jungle out there. It's really dangerous. And the only ones who can protect us are the military. In fact, one very special corner of the military that has vast capacity to protect us. If you look at the vast capacity of that part of that organization, let's say it's the size of this mobile device, .mil. If you look at the .gov world in the United States, let's say it's the size of this stage. And if you look at .com and IPv6, how high can you go? How far can you go? So both parties are clearly wrong. Both parties are clearly wrong. The market is inert. It's inert. On the Internet of Things, the market will not solve the problem of our things talking about us without us. It's just not going to. And the government alone, as we have heard already this morning, cannot solve this problem.
Did you have any particularly great schemes? One of the things I'm keen that we end up with from this panel discussion is at least one or two good ideas. Real success would be that Arne goes back to the office and said, "Hey, we've got to do this." I mean, that would be really good. So let's aim for that. Is there a great idea that we can?
There is a great idea. In my view, there is a game-changing idea for cybersecurity, and that is the widespread adoption of basic cyber hygiene by enterprises. Do you know what's connected to your networks and systems? Do you know what's running on those networks and systems? Are you managing administrative permissions and controlling them for people to have access around your systems? And do you have an automated system in place to alert you when trouble strikes? And then you turn to your CIOs and CITOs and say, how would you demonstrate that to us? Every audit committee, every executive committee, every executive ought to be putting that basic cyber hygiene in place. I don't send my daughter out to school every morning briefing her on streptococcal this and meningococcal that. I say, wash your hands, cough into your sleeve, don't share food. Basic hygiene goes a long way.
That's great. Yeah. And it's clearly a popular idea as well. That's great. I think any other president of the BDI, I would hesitate to ask the question of.
Why me then?
But you've had such a long history in the tech sector yourself. You've worked with customers who've been grappling with this issue for years as well. You were with Bitkom for, was it 5 years as president? Bitkom's our German industry association member, by the way. Would you say that your industry members understand that they need a basic cyber hygiene, and would you say that they are keeping their cyber hands clean?
Do they understand the necessity? I'd say yes. Do they understand what that means, where they have to invest, what has to be protected? I'd be very, very skeptic. And I also see a big differentiation between, first of all, those companies who are within the ITC sector. They are much more aware of that subject maybe because they know their faults much better than their customers. I don't want to comment on that. And in the remaining part of the industry, I see a big difference between large companies and the small and medium-sized business in Germany, which are very strong in Germany, but they are not really IT focused. If you talk to the guy Mr. Schömer mentioned and wake him up at 3 in the morning, this manager of a small and medium-sized business or the owner, he would probably not even talk about IT. He would still talk about EDV, which is a bit a different issue. And I'm not blaming those people. It's really a responsibility of the core ITC industry to, let's be very open, to wake them up. Not to frighten them, but to wake them up. And the same applies for civil society. And 2 last sentences to a very German situation. We Germans tend to concentrate much more on data privacy issues than on security and safety issues. We do not balance these 3 challenges, and I'm very sad that our new data protection law, which we have for the member states of the union, which is good because it provides the same level playing field. But there's one basic error in it. It still has the basis of what we call in Germany Datensparsamkeit. That's something of the last century. And in the last century, in the late 60s, that was okay. Simply thinking, when you don't have the data, you can't struggle around with it. That was fine until the late 60s. But this is a totally wrong principle for the 21st century, where all the associations, all the companies, even all the governments need quite a lot of data. And of course, these data must be safe, transmitting this data must be secured, and it needs a privacy issue. So we have to balance these 3.
And in your campaign, as it were, to try and improve the situation so that, how did you express it, so that there is widespread adoption of cyber hygiene and they know what to do, not just they know there's a problem, but they know what to do. What more would you like government to do? Because this panel is about government. Do you need them to do anything else, or is it, as you say, mostly for the tech industry to work with their customers?
I'm not the one who always asks the government when you don't know the right way. I think what we need from governments is a legal framework, which must be open enough for a much more speedy technical development. We cannot believe that in the process of providing laws and regulations, we could cope up with the speed of technical development. There's no way at all. So what we need is a framework. But of course we need a framework, because as you said, industry is a nerd. I mean, there would be some of us who really would like to do what they want, not caring about civil society, not caring a clue about data privacy and all that stuff. So I'm the one who asked for a legal framework, but please let's keep it open enough that industry plus civil society can fill it with modern architecture and modern technique.
I think in the title here we've got trust and security, haven't we? Trust, and it does seem to me that a big thing with that stops businesses being inert is the absolute terror of losing trust because they've somehow had something go wrong with data or with their networks that causes them to lose their reputation and I think nowhere is that more pronounced in the world where data meets the consumer. And our fourth panelist is Stephen Winners. Now, Stephen, I think, you're one of the leaders of digital consumer business here in Germany. You've won awards. Stefan's company owns Zing, that I believe many of you will be signed up to. The LinkedIn for the German-speaking world, Focus.de. We were talking earlier, and I think Stefan really does understand and has seen the development of the consumer market and what data brings to that. So do you think in your world, Stefan, people understand the need for this cyber hygiene? Would you say that there is widespread adoption of it, or are there other concerns? Is it more about the data than the security?
Can I tell you?
Yeah, it's on.
Can I tell you a little history what happened over the last 3 years or 4 years, just to give you a few examples what has changed, both on government side as well as on the consumer side. So 4 or 5 years ago, at least in the German-speaking market, privacy was not a big topic for the masses. So all the market research we did for our brands when it came to competitive advantages, the number usually was 5% of our customer cared about privacy things. 95% said it's nice to have it, but there's no need and it gives us not any differentiation to our competitors. And that has changed dramatically. Today, in every survey we do, between 20 and 40 people, 40% of the people we interview say it is becoming a major concern. And why is that? Because it got, in the consumer internet, totally out of control. Totally out of control. If you go today and ask Google and send them an email that they should send you all the data they have collected, just think about what you have searched in the last months. Just think about where you have been. Who have you called from your Android phone? Similar things with Facebook. Similar things in China with Chinese companies. You will get terabytes of data back if you ask them what they have recorded about you. And we have been in 2012, we acquired the majority of Zing in 2012 in December. It's a listed company here in Germany at the stock market. It is the LinkedIn of Germany. We have more users and actually more members than LinkedIn here in Germany. And we found out the way how LinkedIn, who was based at that time in Ireland from data protection rights, had a totally different approach to connect people by acquiring tons of data which you can buy in America. And no one of you should be surprised now because the development is so fast. If you are on a stationary PC in America and you're on a TripAdvisor page, I think TripAdvisor you all are aware, and you look at a hotel, you shouldn't be surprised that you will be followed by that hotel in the next fortnight, because there are companies like Tapet who identify you by searching your name and cookie information, that they're tracking you behind you, and that's legal in America. It is very grave from a legal perspective here in Europe. And when we started in 2012 discussing it here to the Commission in Brussels, and we invited them on our conference, on the DoD conference, which is a tech conference here in Munich, to our members of parliament in Berlin and here in Munich, in Bavaria. No one really understood that. And as a media company, we took the effort to make that transparent and to write about it. John, if you ask me, probably the biggest change in the head of the government was when it was clear that Google and Apple are going after the cars and the mass market car producers who provides millions of jobs in Europe. Because that changed. And if I talked to a board member of Volkswagen or BMW a few years ago, no one said Google is a competitor. Even Google was at that time already an investor in Uber, collecting all that tons of data. And during the last 2-3 years, we have made, from my perspective, tremendous success. It takes time, but we get more and more information. People get aware about those facts. I understand what you're saying with the legal framework. I couldn't agree more. We need a legal framework. We are very happy that we have now in Europe, until 2018, it's the same rights, that everyone has the same data protection, that helps us to build the same products globally. We have a chance to be on a level playing field. I think from a consumer perspective, consumers get more and more aware about those things. And we are building products as Border Media, as Zing, who have a clear competitive advantage because we do not do certain things. We have our servers here in Germany, according to the European privacy laws. We do not mix certain amount of data, and we see that it's more and more appreciated by the customer. And we're able, for example, with Zing, to stay ahead with our products and services. And LinkedIn was sold to Microsoft on a global base, but in Germany, Zing was keeping up with the product and with consumers.
So are you saying that in the German-speaking market, I mean, could it be that you've cracked cybersecurity, so everyone's very confident that you'll look after the data, and what they're mostly worried about is the privacy of it? Or is it that they just haven't appreciated yet that there are these threats from theft and other things? Is it? I mean, so what do you think the situation is?
That's a great question. I mean, if I look at my data, we have from market research now 20% of our consumers, overall brands. We reach every month 45 million people in this country. 20% are now very aware about data privacy. All what the media have brought about the use of personal data, also using emails and breaking into accounts, has helped us to make that environment, the consumer internet, better, because we build better products. We really make sure that your data stays private, that we build. Now I switch my position, talking about consumer products, but changing on a position where we build those products. We put tons of efforts that the data stays private, that our platforms are not hacked. And I can tell you, from a consumer perspective, our brands, the CTOs are thinking of their time at least 20 to 30%. How can I protect my platform being hacked or being attacked out of Eastern Europe for 150 euros to bring down your site if you don't transfer money? And it takes a lot of efforts to do so. And for the masses, I would say in Germany, I don't have the data, but my guess is more than 50% have heard intensively and are thinking about it. So starting in 2012, where there was no topic, there was a clear competitive advantage for global players who collected all the data, to now, I'm very positive. There's a huge swing, and politicians understand that we have to move faster. For many political institutions, if you talk, I mean, they understand they have very good institutions. They have very good head of departments working for the ministers. They are very aware what's happening. But to understand how fast the speed of technology changes, what is now possible, what you can do by identifying persons and personalities, I mean, that is to keep up with the speed, to making that transparent, and to think about what means that from a government perspective, from keep a level playing field, to have the same playing ground for everyone. That is a very hard challenge for the companies, for the media, for the consumers, and for the politicians.
It sounds like broadly you think government's heading in the right sort of direction here for the issues that you're concerned about. Do any of the other panelists want to come in with a quick response on anything before we open it up to the floor? So that gives you the chance to be thinking in a moment. Any questions or observations you want to make? We've got just over 20 minutes.
So two things. I don't want us to confuse privacy for cybersecurity. I think there's a big difference between the two. And on the privacy thing, I would only say is that we are moving. There is greater consumer concern about the onward use of their data. The first time you ever pick up your phone and there's a number there you don't recognize and the phone tells you it's probably Cameron or probably my daughter, I had a generic phone number. It said, probably Cameron. I said, what's going on? What is going on with this phone that it can now tell me from a generic number that it was probably my daughter? There's a lot going on in terms of technology, but we shouldn't confuse privacy for security. I mean, that would be a big step. The basic hygiene that I'm talking about relates to cybersecurity. What are some things that we know? We know that all known cyber bads have fixes. All known bads have fixes. And hygiene prevents or helps you rapidly mitigate 80 to 90% of the bad things that are happening out there. The problem is we're not doing it. And when I explain this to people, they say, well, what do you mean really? I said, well, really, dentists have told us for a long time that if we brush and floss and visit twice a year, we can reduce 80 to 90% of the things known to cause cavities. We still may get root canals, right? Bad genes, bad luck, bad choices in your food. But I don't recommend managing your oral hygiene by root canal. And at the moment, the cybersecurity industry is essentially sending a message to every enterprise: you need to know what the important things are to you. Well, baloney, let's just decide that it's our IP, which includes our business processes and our plans. You own your customer data and you own your employee data. Those are things important to you. Don't make you guess. You shouldn't have to become your own pathologist where you're documenting all the germs and potential threats out there. A lot is known. So we're not acting as if we know anything about the environment that we're in from a cybersecurity point of view, and we know a lot, and we could do a lot better. On the question of privacy, it's an entirely different issue, again, where a lot of progress has been made.
Yeah. Let's bring some people in with some comments and questions. I know there are some. I can certainly see a microphone over on this side. If there's anything on the, yeah, there is here. Thank you very much. Okay, so usual rules. Introduce yourself, please, briefly. Maybe we'll take 3 or 4 points. So keep your hand up while the mic gets to you. Is there anybody over here who wants to come in? So there's a lady here. So if you can get the mic, if you put your hand up so the microphone can get to you. Just keep your hand up until the mic gets to you. Thank you. Yeah.
Since Arne Schönbaum was addressing me, I have to respond. I'm Peter Dehnen, president of the German Supervisory Board Association, and we have been spending a great deal of time thinking with the BSI about how to educate German Supervisory Board members in the field of cyber. And I like your hygiene approach, and I think that reminds me of if you hear a doctor talk to another doctor, and we were standing there, we wouldn't understand a word. And I think I often experience if a CIO or an IT person or an information specialist talks to another CIO information specialist, they have a great time. If you put a supervisory board member right in the middle of them, he wouldn't get anything. Now, I guess my point is, rather than thinking about concepts, let's think about how to do things step by step. And that means how to educate the people that are running your company. And at least in Germany, a company is run by the supervisory board in a sense, even though the operational side is run by the CEO, the supervisory board picks and fires the CEO. So it has overall responsibility. So how to educate these people, and once you got it on their agenda, you'll be sure it will be on everybody's agenda because they will be following up. So I guess one step would be is thinking about what they should know, how to get it across to them, not being the CIO, show your supervisory board how well educated you are and how sophisticated.
Thank you very much. That's great. So anybody else, we'll come to you. Anybody else want to come in on this side? Put your hand up. So take your question, madam, please.
Yes, thank you. I want to come back to...
Would you just introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Claudia Eckert. I'm director of the Fraunhofer Institute for Applied and Integrated Security, and I'm professor at Technical University of Munich. Jane, you had a little remark concerning your daughter. You give her advices when she leaves going to school. Very simple the advices. But something will happen anyway, and you have, or we at least have, some sort of health care. So my question is, do we need something similar here in the area of data care or security care, building up, and that's governmental issue, building up some sort of infrastructure, building up some sort of insurances for doing these kind of things. So you have something behind it if something happens. But in the area of security, there's nothing. So what do we need?
That's a great question. Anybody else want to come in with another point? Yes, we'll take this one here. And is that one there as well, sir? We'll come to you as well, so we can cope with 4.
Andrew Ginter, Vice President of Industrial Security from Waterfall Security Solutions. We're talking about the role of government. If we imagine a scenario where a cyber disaster takes out the electric power in all of Germany for a week, and the lights finally come back on, and one company is identified as, the one that was hacked, and the president of that company comes online, in a video on TV and says, "We're very sorry for this fiasco. I want you all to rest assured that we did not lose one red penny because we have insurance." He'd be lynched. Many businesses address cyber risk in a way that's appropriate to the business, but inappropriate to citizens. What should government do to encourage businesses to deal with cyber risk in a way that is appropriate to the needs of the citizens?
Excellent question. Thank you very much. And we'll take one here, and then we'll come back to the panel.
Yes, thank you. Andreas Berger from Allianz. I'm on the board of the corporate and specialty side, so we provide actually cyber insurance. Now, what I'm trying to say, and I like your hygiene point, and I also like the reference to the management liabilities, but unfortunately today, everybody's talking about the awareness. Yes, there is awareness, but when you try to do something about things, people talk about cost. So there's avoidance. So awareness is there, but it's the wrong awareness. So I try to find out from you, if we talk about severity of risk, you talked about critical infrastructures, is there something that you have to put in place in sense of compulsory risk management procedures, for instance, versus where there's frequency and low severity, you deal it with yourself? Is that something you want to do? Because quite frankly, if we continue like that, at the moment the world market is 3 billion of premium, and 2.5 billion is US. And they predict that 20 billion will be in 3 years or so. I don't believe in it if we don't do anything about it.
And that 3 billion figure is in what? In cyber?
Worldwide cyber insurance.
Cyber insurance. Wow, that's a big figure. You'd like to come back and respond to some of these points. Maybe just by Arne, before asking you, I discussed this sort of thing some years ago with GCHQ. I guess they're your equivalent, are they, in this field? And they certainly had the idea of, some simple guidance, cyber hygiene guidance that could be pushed out to all SMEs. I'm not sure the UK government is always seen as the place that businesses turn to for advice. But anyway, Arne, respond to some of these points.
Yeah, first, I try to do it in a category like, as I mentioned, like Mr. Dienen said. So what we try to do is, for example, I'm having twice a year invited always the DAX and MDAX companies separately, where we are exactly discussing also on the management level, where are we staying regarding information security, what is the state of today, how is it developing, and how are you reacting on it regarding risk management to bring it into it. And then we have more on the operational level, not just on the political level, but more on the operational level, how are you dealing really with cyber risks? Like we have with the Alliance for Cybersecurity, where we are having different kind of working groups. One is automotive, another one is chemicals, and so on. So really the users who are discussing it. And I think this is, sorry to say, continuous work. Continuous, stupid work. Just do it. And this is something we are doing. The other issue is, which was raised, right, was regarding critical infrastructures. Everybody is now having in mind probably the book of Mark Ellsberg, Blackout, huh?
Sure.
That's great. I mean, if you think about on what it was based, right, it was based on an academic study from the German parliament, and then he put some love into it and salt and pepper, and then it was a great novel. Bestseller.
By far.
But this is something which put a very serious issue to a nice way and how to deal with it. And that's exactly, in November last year, because the German government is acting, so we're waiting for more homework to do. But in November last year, it was approved by the cabinet, the chancellor's office also, and the whole government decided what is the cybersecurity strategy looking like in the future. The second one, the first one was in 2011, the second one now in November 2016. And there it was exactly said, we have an IT security law where there had been lots of skepticism where we said we need minimum standards because businesses sometimes calculate in an appropriate way, but the risks which could come if the critical infrastructure is not working properly is too high, the damages we could face. And therefore we have this kind of IT security law regarding minimum standards, and especially if something is going to happen, that it was also part of the strategy where we said, okay, BSI has to build up, named MIRTs, Mobile Incident Response Teams, so that we're not just getting the information, something is out, but that we can get in and help and support the critical infrastructures there. And I think this is a very important step, because then we really become a partner and a value added. And this is exactly what we are trying to do, and I think this is really, really important. And I'm a big fan of a market. And when I see that 3 billion already, let's say the rainmaker of Alliance is could earn 20 billion, something like that. So this is something, I think this is a great market which is going to develop, and we are still at an early stage, and this is going to develop. And I think there we have to monitor and to support how this is developing. And for me, we are not at the end, especially with the NIS regulation, also on the European level. So it is very close connected, the German regulation and the NIS regulation on the European level. And I think these are the first steps to move forward to enhance really cybersecurity at the appropriate level.
So I'll take a...
Sorry, one last issue regarding cyber hygiene. We are very successful with the small, medium-sized companies regarding BSI Grundschutz. So this is the basis level we are having. It is free of charge. You can use it, you can get it from the homepage and so on. And it had been very complex, it's now a bit old, and we are going to bring out a new modular version in May this year. This is nearly finished, I saw it already, so that this is much easier to use, much easier to handle. So again, to support businesses to get a minimum standard.
So I'd like to see if there's a response from all the panellists to these questions. If anybody's got anything you want to say, I can see you wanted to come in, Stefan.
If you like. I just wanted to answer your question you made about boards. My view, if you are in charge for a large company in Germany, listed or unlisted, I truly believe that the management team can only run the company. And I'm sitting on many boards. I do not believe that a supervisory board can run the company on tech questions. We have made great success changing the companies in these fields we discussed, data security, technology, by abolishing the nomination committee and introducing a tech board. So Zing today has a tech board. Sabine Bendig, she's now the first female CEO of Microsoft in Germany since a year. She was on that board for 4 years, and she has a master's degree in engineering from MIT. And she helped us with 2 other guys to change the company. Now, if you're in charge for a company, to get more relevant information on it, just introduce tech boards instead of nomination boards you might not actually need for smaller, mid-sized...
But surely it should be on the agenda of the supervisory board as well, at least to be asking the executives the questions.
I just wanted to add that point. What we have seen in the last 2-3 years is that the auditing firms are now becoming very suspicious about those questions. I mean, the effect you have if the customer data is stolen and published on the net with credit card information for consumer net. I mean, this is the worst accident you can have in a company. I mean, today was data around in the media about the acquisition of Verizon acquiring AOL, and they brought down the price by 10%, and there was a long discussion of walking away because that data was stolen. I mean, so the auditing firms are providing information, they're providing services, and it becomes more and more discussion in boardrooms throughout Germany. How secure is your environment? How secure is the company? And I think it's a good development.
Absolutely.
So this to me could not be more important, and frankly, it's a very honest conversation. I'm on the board of a Fortune 100 company in the United States. The fiduciary responsibilities of that board require that they look at these questions. They can't outsource it. The problem is, the problem that you described about executives talking to their CIOs. I had a conversation with one. I said, how often do you speak to your CIO? He said, yeah, not too often. I said, why not? He said, I don't speak dolphin.
Not good.
Not good, but it's changing, but not enough. I mean, let's face it, CFOs were not always the darlings of the boardroom that they are today. They started out as obscure laborers in an arcane field that people didn't really understand. And now, I mean, they're powerhouses. So when we talk about that, I mean, one way for boards to understand it is to take something like the critical security controls by the NGO that I'm a director of and used to lead. And that's what they're called, the critical security controls. They're at the heart of the British measures. ETSI just adopted them last summer as the core part of their first technical bulletin ever published. Zurich Insurance uses them. Why? Because they're pretty straightforward. They're not easy, but they're straightforward on the kinds of things that you should do first. What's the most important thing to do first? Wash your hands. I mean, there's a lot of other things you can do, but wash your hands. It's the most important thing to do first, and it's measurable. The problem with audit companies is that they're each flying their own flag when it comes to cybersecurity. They're looking at very different things, even year over year. And so there's no way for you to know measurably whether or not your vulnerability is reduced or not. So I think that's an important point. On the whole question, I mean, this is on the whole question of backup systems and plans, or, systems. I do not tell my daughter, in the event of an emergency, control for shock, check your blood pressure, suture your wound. I mean, there are systems that back up on a medical front, just as you say. And on cyber, governments, this is where governments have been working for a long time. On the response side, there are CERTs. There are these incident response teams of other kinds. There's greater collaboration and information sharing across the board. So there are backup systems. There are experts that, the market's a wonderful mechanism. So you can rent that. I mean, two colleagues of mine run one of the most highly regarded individual cybersecurity services for high net worth individuals and celebrities, to ensure that their profile and their data is protected. So there's a market out there, but there are also increasingly public sector systems.
Jane, I'm just going to stop you there because we've got about 3 minutes, I think, and I just want to, and I do want to ask Professor Kemp to come in as well. But I also want to ask you, given that international is in our title, to reflect on, and one of the goals, I think, of the NIS directive, the Network Information Security Directive, was to try and raise all the boats across Europe. Try and get everybody in Europe up to the same standard. So, could you perhaps give me a comment on what you think about the German comparisons with international standards, and maybe some thoughts on whether we could be doing more at an international level to address some of these issues?
Again, I think we have to distinguish between the safety and security issues and put away the privacy issue for a moment. I'd say on safety and security, there are probably not really big differences to what do we need and what do we want to have, what are we required to have. I see a major difference in how the market is looking at companies if it comes to any kind of deviation. As you mentioned in your question, is it at the end of the day sufficient if I confess I'm really sorry, but I can tell you, you get some kind of financial, some kind of money, so that you have not any financial damage. Is the reputational risk something which the public looks at? And I think, talking about that, we have very big differences between individual countries. Very, very big differences. And at the end of the day, if something is not regulated or not required by law, the question whether a company does it or not, and that's whether it deals with security, with safety, or any other issue, is a question who pays for it. Is it worthwhile to do it? And worthwhile is not just a pecuniary question. It can also be a reputational question. But at the end of the day, each and every management will invest if they believe at the end somebody pays for it.
Yeah.
I spent 25 years of my life at a company which, at least in Germany, can be very proud of, that they never had a security incident. And at public, they deem to be, this company deems to be very, very safe. Why is that? Not just because we know more about that subject. The only reason was that our customers were willing to pay. And why are they willing to pay? Because they are forced by law to pay attention on these security issues. Because our customers were lawyers, were auditors, and were tax consultants. And they are punished by law if they fool around with the client data, or they allow a third person fool around with the client data. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, it may be very easy. If there's someone to pay, you can relatively easy increase levels of security, because the management and the board is paying attention on that. Not looking at technical issues for a moment. Just, is it worthwhile to invest in that area? And I think we have to be open on that discussion. I'm glad to hear that your experience at Burda Media is that the people raise consciousness about those issues. Sorry to say, I still don't believe that they are answering correctly. At least when it comes to the question, do you want to pay for it? My personal experience is pretty different. If that would be right, what they tell you, the number of users in certain social networks would have to go down dramatically, which I didn't see.
No, I know you'd love to come back on that one, Stefan, but we absolutely have run out of time. But I would like to give the last 60 seconds or so, if you would like to take it, Herr Schoenberg, on the international aspects of what we've been talking about. Do you share information and ideas, and has that got better, or do you think there's more that needs to be done there?
So last week I just had been in Washington for 1 week. And it was, of course, US is one of our closest partners. And of course, we're exchanging information. Of course, we are learning with each other. Next week, I will have a very close discussion with France. Of course, we're exchanging information. And it's the same with the European Union, with the ENISA. It's the same with UK. You know, they just found, I think yesterday, GCHQ now is having in parallel a new cyber issue there, which was just opened yesterday, I think it was, by the Queen. Yeah. So this is something exactly, we are in very close information exchange on a confidential level, because it's always better to talk with each other than about each other, number one. And number two is, we can learn always from each other. And I mean, just dumb pants are not learning, and we are learning. So we are on a good way.
That's a very good British end to our conversation. References to the Queen, I like that. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a warm round of applause to our panel.